Forget everything you know about trucks. You think they are just boring tools with four wheels and a bed. You are dead wrong. We are about to uncover the true freaks of automotive history. Imagine a truck made entirely of wood and leather. Picture a massive beast with an engine that screams but has absolutely no radiator. Or a three-wheeled nightmare that threatens to flip over if you turn the steering wheel too fast. These aren't sci-fi movies. This is history. Which one is a genius invention and which one is a death trap? You have to watch until number 1 to believe your eyes. Smash that subscribe button right now because we are going full throttle into the 10 weirdest trucks ever made. Let's kick things off with something that looks less like a truck and more like a motorcycle having an identity crisis. This is the Tempo handseat. Originating in Germany right after the war, this three-wheeled oddity was the definition of desperate innovation to get the economy moving again. The most striking feature is undeniably that single front wheel. But look closer at the mechanics. The engine isn't under the seat or in the back. The entire powertrain, a tiny 400cc two-stroke motor producing just 15 horsepower, is mounted directly on top of the front fork. It looks incredibly fragile, yet it was the workhorse for thousands of businesses. Driving a handseat was a physical workout and a chaotic lesson in physics. Because the vibrating engine sat heavily on the front wheel, when you turned the steering wheel, you were physically swinging the entire engine assembly left or right. And here is the scary part. The center of gravity was frighteningly high. If you took a corner too fast while the cargo bed was empty, the truck would literally try to somersault. It was notorious for tipping over on sharp turns, yet it offered a top speed of around 30 miles per hour, which was terrifyingly fast for a tricycle loaded with bricks or produce. Despite its comical appearance and the constant threat of rolling over, the Tempo handset was so simple and cheap that it became a legend. While Germany eventually moved on to four wheels, the tooling for this truck was sold to India, where it evolved into the Bajaj auto rickshaws. So, in a way, this weird German tricycle never really died. It just emigrated. But if you think driving a three-wheeler is scary, wait until you see our next entry. We are moving from 3 wheels to 4, with a truck from East Germany that smoked like a chimney and ran on a mixture of oil and hope. Crossing the Iron Curtain into East Germany, we find the Framo V901. While the US was building massive V8 pickups, the engineers in the GDR were working with severe limitations. The Framo V901 is a fascinating study in communist minimalism. Produced in the 1950s, it looks somewhat charming today with its classic curves and separate headlights. However, make no mistake, this was a bare-bones utility vehicle designed for a world where steel and fuel were scarce. It served as everything from a delivery van to a minibus and even an ambulance, proving that necessity is indeed the mother of invention. Under the hood sat a minuscule 900cc three-cylinder two-stroke engine. Yes, a two-stroke truck engine. That meant every time you fired it up, you were greeted with the distinctive ring-ding-ding sound and a thick cloud of blue smoke. It produced roughly 24 to 28 horsepower. To put that in perspective, most modern riding lawnmowers have more kick than this truck. It struggled to reach 50 miles per hour, and if you were hauling a heavy load of coal uphill, you could probably walk faster alongside it. The cabin was noisy, hot, and smelled permanently of burnt oil. Despite its lack of power, the V901 has gained a cult following today among vintage enthusiasts. It represents a time when mechanics were simple enough that you could fix your engine with a hammer and a wrench on the side of the road. It's a cute, smoky piece of history that paved the way for the Barcus van, but we are done with small and cute. Let's jump from the tiny 900cc Framo to a French monster that was built to move mountains, featuring an engine so big it could power a small ship. They say everything is bigger in Texas, but clearly they never saw the French-made Willème TG 200. This wasn't just a truck, it was a land train. Produced by Willème, a company famous for heavy-duty haulers, the TG 200 was the undisputed king of the road in the 1960s. The TG stood for Tracteur Géant, giant tractor, and it lived up to the name. This 8A4 beast was designed specifically for convoy exceptionnel, or exceptional convoys, tasked with hauling super heavy loads like electrical transformers and locomotive parts across the country. Just look at the scale of this thing. The truck itself weighed over 40 tons without a load. Under that massive locomotive-like hood, it was often powered by a Detroit diesel V16 engine or a massive Cummins power plant, generating the immense torque needed to pull loads exceeding 200 tons. The design is unforgettable, a flat, imposing vertical face with a windshield that seems to look down on everything else on the road. The sheer number of tires needed to distribute the weight of the loads it carried is mind-boggling, turning the asphalt into a mere suggestion of a road. Driving this Leviathan required incredible skill. There was limited power steering assist compared to today. It was pure muscle and mechanical leverage. The Willème TG200 remains a symbol of industrial might, a dinosaur from an era before modular, self-propelled trailers took over the heavy lifting. It is a machine of pure brute force that commands respect. Speaking of unique engines, our next truck didn't just have a big engine. It had an engine that didn't need a single drop of water to stay cool, screaming down the highway with a sound you will never forget. If you were in Europe in the 1960s and heard a loud screaming roar coming down the road, it was probably a Magirus-Deutz Rundhauber. The nickname Rundhauber translates to round hood, referring to that distinctively curved alligator-style nose that gave it a friendly yet tough appearance. But the real magic wasn't the shape, it was the engineering philosophy. While the rest of the world was fussing with radiators, water pumps, hoses, and coolant leaks, Magirus-Deutz simply said, "Why bother?" and removed the cooling system entirely. These trucks were powered by legendary air-cooled diesel engines, available in V8 or even V12 configurations. That's right, no water. They used massive high-speed fans to blast air directly over the finned cylinders to keep them cool. This made them incredibly reliable in extreme climates, whether it was the freezing cold of the Alps where water would freeze, or the scorching heat of the Sahara where water would boil. The Magirus didn't care. As long as there was air, it would run. The sound is iconic, a distinct high-pitched clatter that is music to the ears of truck enthusiasts. The Rundhauber was tough as nails, becoming the preferred choice for fire trucks and construction vehicles across the globe. The rounded hood wasn't just for style, it allowed for better visibility on rough terrain compared to the square noses of the competition. It represents German engineering at its most pragmatic. From the noisy construction sites of Germany, let's travel to the quiet, majestic wilderness of America for a vehicle that is as yellow as the sun and holds a special place in U.S. history. This next entry is a Hollywood star. You might recognize the white 706 as the Jammer buses from Yellowstone National Park. Built by the White Motor Company in the late 1930s, these vehicles are perhaps the most beautiful fusion of a rugged truck chassis and a passenger coach ever created. They were designed specifically for the National Park Service to transport tourists in style through the American wilderness. Painted a bright, distinctive yellow, they were made to stand out against the greenery of the forests, becoming an icon of the park experience. The most distinct feature is the canvas rollback top. In an era before panoramic glass roofs, this was high-tech luxury. The driver could roll the canvas roof back, allowing passengers to gaze up at the towering peaks of the Tetons or the geysers of Yellowstone without obstruction. Powered by a reliable inline-six engine, they weren't fast, climbing steep mountain passes at maybe 25 to 30 miles per hour, but speed wasn't the point. The point was the view. Passengers sat on leather bench seats, experiencing the park with the wind in their hair and the smell of pine trees filling the cabin. But why are they called jammers? It's because of the non-synchronized manual transmissions. The drivers had to double clutch and often jam the gears to get them to shift on the steep mountain grades, creating a distinct grinding sound. These buses are built on the rugged white model 706 truck chassis, giving them the durability to handle rough park roads for nearly a century. But while the white 706 had a classic long nose, Truck designers were starting to realize that sometimes the best place for the driver is right on top of the engine. Before the flat-faced trucks we see today dominated the highways, there was a transition period, and the Kenworth Bullnose is the king of that era. Produced in the early 1950s, this was Kenworth's cab-over engine, COE design, but it didn't look like a brick wall. It had style. The front end was rounded, featuring a distinctive bubble shape that earned it the Bullnose nickname. This truck represents the golden age of American trucking, where design flair met industrial utility on the newly formed interstate system. Due to strict length regulations on highways back then, manufacturers had to squash the cabin to maximize trailer space. Kenworth did it with elegance, often packing a Cummins diesel engine producing over 200 horsepower inside. However, the driver paid the price. The engine was literally inside the cab with you, covered by a large metal doghouse between the seats. It was hot, noisy, and cramped. If you wanted to check the oil, you had to disassemble parts of the interior. There was no tilting mechanism for the cab yet. Despite the maintenance nightmare, the Bullnose was the chariot of the American road warrior. Seeing a restored Bullnose today is a rare treat, capturing the romance of the open road before aerodynamics turned everything into a wedge. It commands high prices at auctions and is beloved for its Art Deco curves. But the problem of accessing the engine in these flat-front trucks was a genuine nightmare for mechanics, until our next contender invented a sci-fi solution that changed trucking forever. The White Motor Company strikes again, but this time with something that looked like it drove straight out of a 1950s sci-fi comic. This is the White 3000. At first glance, it looks like a futuristic low-slung pug. The cabin sits incredibly low to the ground, ahead of the front wheels, giving the driver a panoramic view of the road that was unmatched at the time. It was marketed for inner-city deliveries because you could spot pedestrians right in front of the bumper. It usually ran on a Mustang 6-cylinder gas engine, perfect for city hauling. But the real party trick of the White 3000 was the power lift cab. Remember how hard it was to work on the Kenworth Bullnose? Well, White solved it. With the turn of a key, an electric actuator would tilt the entire cabin forward, exposing the engine completely. This was revolutionary. Mechanics loved it. No more crawling through grease or taking apart the dashboard. The truck literally bowed down to you. It was the first time this technology was successfully mass-produced, setting the standard for modern cabover trucks. The White 3000 became a favorite for beer trucks, garbage trucks, and fuel tankers across America. Its futuristic, rounded Art Deco styling makes it one of the most collectible vintage trucks today. It proved that a work truck could be smart, ergonomic, and incredibly cool-looking. From hauling beer and trash in the city, let's move to a truck that hauled something much sweeter and came with a sound every kid in California knew by heart. If you grew up in Southern California between the 1930s and the 1960s, this vehicle brings tears of nostalgia to your eyes. The Helms Bakery Truck wasn't just a vehicle, it was a rolling institution. Whether built on a twin coach or the iconic Divco chassis, these trucks were painted in a creamy ivory color and did not sell their goods in stores. They came to you. They were the Uber Eats of the mid-20th century, but with way more class and fresh donuts. The truck was custom designed for one purpose: selling donuts, bread, and cookies door to door. The driver, known as the helmsman, would blow a distinctive whistle, toot toot, that signaled the neighborhood kids to come running. But the engineering quirk here was the storage. The back wasn't just an empty cargo hold. It was lined with beautiful custom wooden drawers filled with fresh pastries. These were stand-drive vans, allowing the driver to easily jump in and out hundreds of times a day while driving at low neighborhood speeds. Mechanically, they were simple, reliable, and not built for speed, rarely exceeding 40 miles per hour. But culturally, they were a heavyweight. They represent a lost era of personalized service where the bakery came to your curb. The smell of fresh bread wafting from these trucks is a core memory for millions of Americans. The Helms truck was all about clever storage, but our next van reinvented the entire architecture of the automobile, predicting the future of the minivan decades early. You might think the minivan was invented in the 1980s by Chrysler, but you'd be wrong. Meet the grandfather of the modern minivan, the DKW Schnellester, or Rapid Transporter. Post-war Germany needed a utility vehicle, and DKW delivered something radically advanced. While everyone else was using rear-wheel drive with a long drive shaft running under the floor, DKW put the engine and the drive wheels at the very front. This was a front-wheel drive van in 1949, an absolute rarity. Why does that matter? Because it allowed the rear floor to be completely flat and incredibly low, just 16 inches off the ground. You could load cargo almost directly from the curb without lifting it high. It was a packaging miracle. Later versions were powered by a 3-cylinder, 2-stroke engine producing around 42 horsepower. It wasn't fast, topping out at roughly 60 miles per hour, but the layout was pure genius. The wheels were pushed to the absolute corners of the vehicle, maximizing interior space. The Schnellester looked like a loaf of bread on wheels, with a short, stubby hood and a wide stance. It was weird, yes, but it predicted the future of cargo vans. Every modern front-wheel drive delivery van owes a debt to this little German oddball. It showed that moving the mechanical bits out of the way creates more room for business. But if you think metal is the only way to build a car, you're in for a shock with our number 1 pick, which used materials usually reserved for furniture. And finally, at number 1, we have the van that proves size isn't everything. Meet the Lloyd LT600. This van comes from a brand with one of the weirdest nicknames in history, the Leukoplast Bomber or Band-Aid Bomber. Why? Because the earlier cars from Lloyd were literally made of wood frames covered in fabric vinyl due to steel shortages. While this LT600 model eventually upgraded to a steel body, it never lost its toy-like soul and lightweight construction. It is impossibly small. It looks less like a truck and more like a shrunken 1950s wagon. Under the hood, it was powered by a tiny 600cc air-cooled 2-cylinder engine producing a whopping 19 horsepower. Yes, 19 horsepower. It weighed only about 1/400 lbs. It was slow, barely reaching 50 miles per hour downhill, and it had suicide doors that opened backward. Yet, for many small businesses in Europe, this was their workhorse, a step up from a bicycle but cheaper than a real truck. The LT600 is the ultimate example of micro-trucking. It bridged the gap between a motorcycle and a real van. Today, seeing one next to a modern Ford Transit is hilarious. It looks like it could fit inside the cargo hold of a modern truck. It is bizarre, it is rare, and it is undoubtedly the weirdest, bravest little truck on our list. It reminds us that sometimes the strangest solutions are the ones that get the job done when times are tough. From the massive land trains of France to the tiny wooden vans of Germany, we have seen that the history of trucking is anything but boring. These mechanical oddities remind us that innovation often starts with a strange idea. Now, I have a challenge for you. Which of these trucks would you trust to survive a cross-country road trip today? Drop your choice in the comments below. If you enjoyed this ride through automotive history, please smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.